Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today we're talking 5 players that if you draft them, you'll just be donating your league fee. You'll be the guy that helps out the league, helps fund the pool. We have 5 players, a couple of running backs, a couple of wide receivers. Some of these players I've talked about in the past. Some I haven't. We'll go in the order in which they're being drafted. Right now, if you guys enjoy today's video, be sure to drop a like, hit that subscribe button, get those post notifications on. Got plenty of content coming to you guys in the preseason and during the season to help you guys win your fantasy leagues this season. Let's get into these players. Our first player going in the 3rd round, it is running back Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's going with a 306 as the RB12 on the season right now in ADP. Last season finished as the RB17 and is a back very capable of creating a ton of big plays. He did it last season, had a 7.3% breakaway run rate, which was 12th at the position. 2.3% of his carries also went for gains of 30 plus yards, which was the best at the position. And then 20% of his receptions went for 15 plus yards, which was second at the position. So I think Etienne has proven now at the NFL level, much like he did at the college level, that he's a player that can create a ton of explosive plays. But my concern is on a down-to-down basis, and this was a problem in college too, the results aren't quite as ideal as the ones you see on those big plays. His 4.6 true yards per carry, which takes away those explosive runs and just looks at it on a down-to-down basis. 4.6 yards was 24th in the NFL, so not great. He converted first downs at a below average rate when he also had 1 or 2 yards to a first down, so in short yardage was not good. And it was proven even further in his touchdowns, 13 inside the 5 carries, only 3 touchdowns. And even worse, only 2 touchdowns on carries inside the 3, and he had 9 carries there. So the rest of the league is converting carries inside the 3-yard line into touchdowns at a 47.6% rate. His conversion rate is more in like that 30% range, so nowhere near as good. And for Etienne, I was really excited about his receiving profile coming into the league, especially when you consider his rapport that he had with Trevor Lawrence. And that was Lawrence, a player that he played with in college. But his target share was 7.8%, which was 31st amongst running backs. His target rate, when we talked about James Cook, was at like over 28%. For Etienne, it was just 13.6% in the season. So I haven't really been all that impressed with his receiving work. And now you look at an offense that has a lot of competition for those receptions. When you look at the season Zay Jones just had, add Calvin Ridley. We still have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram as well. And then this team adds Tank Bigsby in the 3rd round of the draft. And I think that speaks volumes to what this team wants to do. And Bigsby being the guy they bring in as someone to help them improve in short yardage situations where Etienne struggled. So there's an opportunity here targeting a physical back in Tank Bigsby that the Jaguars did in the draft for Bigsby to be that guy in short yardage and to be able to convert some touchdowns at a higher rate. And that is going to lose a lot of Etienne's value when you look at this offense. Last season was a top 10 scoring offense, could take another step this year. I don't really think Etienne will improve in a receiving role, and I could see his rushing role be impacted a little bit as well. Bigsby was a guy who averaged 5.4 yards per carry, scored 10 touchdowns in his last season at Auburn, and Auburn had a really poor offense and a really poor offensive line in the SEC, but he still was able to be efficient. This is a player that I think is in the perfect role, exactly what the team is looking for Bigsby, and I think it will impact Etienne's value. And right now he's going as an RB1, as a top 12 back in fantasy football. And I think in my draft strategy, like we've talked about in our videos earlier this week, I'm looking for that hero running back. I don't think Etienne can be that guy for me, so he's certainly one I'm avoiding this season. Next up, we move into the 4th round in a wide receiver I haven't talked about for a while, but did talk about, I believe, in a previous video back in maybe July. Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. He's the wide receiver 17 right now, going in the early parts of the 4th round. Meanwhile, last season finished as the wide receiver 37, but was the wide receiver 25 in fantasy points per game. And really, that's where I see him this year, is in wide receiver 25 type of territory. So after Christian McCaffrey arrived, Deebo Samuel was the wide receiver 41 in fantasy points per game, not fantasy points total because he did miss some time, but fantasy points per game, just 6.9 fantasy points per game. He only had 6 targets per game, 4 receptions a game, and 40 receiving yards a game. So it wasn't really at a very high level. And when you look at Deebo Samuel as a player and his profile, he needs volume, because his average depth of target was just 4.1 yards, which was the 3rd lowest amongst players that received at least 15 targets on the season. His yards per route run ranked 58th amongst wide receivers, 1.35, which was the lowest between himself, Ayuk, CMC, and Kittle. So we have a player with far too low of volume and a low average depth of target to be able to return on his draft capital. I know he's elite after the catch. Everybody knows that. He had the sixth best yards after the catch per reception last season. And despite him being a good player after the catch, it didn't really reflect his fantasy finish because, again, he finished as the wide receiver 37 on the season. I think right now he's still being drafted as if Christian McCaffrey isn't there, because you look at some of his numbers. He was 14th in yards, 12th in receptions, 13th in targets in weeks 1 to 6 before McCaffrey arrived. And he's going as wide receiver 17. So these numbers, when you look at last season without McCaffrey, it suits more his draft capital. But right now, we're looking at a player in Christian McCaffrey that's going to run some similar routes in those short areas of the field, take away from his rushing volume. I think Deebo will still receive rushing opportunities, but not nearly at the same level and same volume that he did last season before McCaffrey arrived. So I have a lot of concerns here. There's a lot of competition. There's competition in his area of the field that he runs his routes. There's a run-first offense. Brandon Ayuk is a player that I have higher in my rankings. So Deebo, if you're taking him this early, is just someone that I see he has to have a perfect season in terms of efficiency and touchdowns to be able to return on his ADP. And when you're drafting wide receivers in this area of the draft, there are so many better options that have more assured opportunity, volume, and potential upside too. So player I'm definitely avoiding as well. Next up, we move to the 5th round, a running back I'm also avoiding. Again, this is a running back going in the running back dead zone, J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens. He's currently the running back 20 in ADP, again in the early parts of the 5th round. Last season finished as the RB 52, the running back 31 in fantasy points per game. Dobbins is back. He's off the PUP list. We talked about this in a previous video, and we looked at players that were moving down my rankings. Dobbins was a player that was certainly doing that for me because he wasn't on the field. Came off the PUP about 10 days ago, says he's 100%. I mean, we've heard that before. We heard that last season that Dobbins was going to be ready for week 1. He wasn't ready for week 1. So not a lot of things that I hear from his mouth I'm going to necessarily believe, but it is good to see him on the field if you are someone interested in drafting him. But Dobbins returns to an offense that looks nothing like the one he's been running in the last 3 seasons. And you can expect to see from this offense far more 11 personnel and a pass rate that I think will increase by at least 10%. This was a team that was one of the top teams in the NFL in run rate. You know, they were passing the ball at more like a 50, just over 50% rate. This season, I expect that to be in the 60% range. So this offense is going to change drastically. I think this offense is going to have be much less balanced. I think they'll be in the upper half. Conservatively, I think they'll be in the upper half in pass rate this season. Could be in the top 10 potentially. When you look at Monken's reputation in this league as a play caller, 11 personnel should see a 40% increase compared to previous seasons. So we now have an offense that's going to be much more pass heavy. And you go from that to an offense, or what it was last season, to this offense, and with a mobile quarterback, maybe the best rushing quarterback in the NFL, who in seasons past, if you project him to play a full season, which obviously he hasn't done the last couple of years, he's going to steal about 40 red zone rushing opportunities from Dobbins this season. And it's a quarterback that does not target running backs at a high rate whatsoever. Last season, he was like the lowest amongst active starters, 9.8% target rate to running backs. That's not going to do it for J.K. Dobbins. He's never really been a guy that's had a high receiving volume as it is. But again, I have to factor that in when I also take the fact that I'm probably going to see less rushing opportunities, and I get a quarterback who can steal rushing touchdowns. Like when we talk about other running backs in the league and you look at a mobile quarterback, you're going to ding them for that. And then you move this offense into one that's going to be much more pass happy. And I don't know why we're still taking Dobbins as if he's the player that we've seen in previous offenses for this Ravens team. Now, Dobbins is very efficient, but I don't think that efficiency is going to make up for the likely lack of volume. He was very efficient, though. 11% breakaway run rate, third at the position, 5.2 true yards per carry. So even though he's explosive, he was still efficient on a down-to-down basis. He was 12th in yards after contact per attempt. It's still a good running back. I just don't see the current price right now reflecting what his opportunity is going to be, because even in his 2 seasons being I should say his 1 season being healthy. Last season I wouldn't include a healthy season, but overall, he's never really had a high opportunity share. The Ravens have always wanted to split opportunities. That's still a factor as well. He's a guy I'm not touching. I'm definitely looking at the wide receiver position, maybe even a tight end or quarterback position where he's going in the draft in that 5th round. There's usually there could be a quarterback I like a Justin Herbert. There could be a tight end I like a potentially Darren Waller I'd take in this area of the draft. he's someone I'm certainly avoiding, just cannot see myself drafting. We got 2 players left here. We're moving to DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. He's currently going as the wide receiver 23 in the middle of the 5th round. Last season finished as the wide receiver 22 and the wide receiver 34 in fantasy points per game. So definitely had a couple explosive games, but on a per game basis throughout the season, you really weren't all that happy with what his performance was. And he moves into this Bears offense where I think the reason for concern is pretty easy to put together. I know there's the potential of, hey, I could get a Justin Fields, DJ Moore stack on my team. These are 2 guys that definitely have shown a great connection in training camp. DJ Moore is going to post a high target share. Well, my concern is the rushing volume is still going to be really high. I have no expectation that it's going to change. The team has talked about it remaining at that same level it was last season, which was on 56.2% of plays they were running the football. So I took a look deeper. I think this is something you really need to listen to if you want to draft DJ Moore. Is I looked at teams in the previous 5 seasons that ran the ball in more than 50% of plays. So 10 teams fit that criteria. And only 2 players were able to beat DJ Moore's current ADP as the wide receiver 23. Those were 2020 A.J. Brown, who had 11 touchdowns, and 2018 Tyler Lockett, who scored 10 touchdowns. DJ Moore, career high, 7 touchdowns. He's never reached double-digit touchdowns in his career. That's something that's definitely telling me, why would I be taking him at this current ADP if the only 2 guys that beat this ADP were guys that scored double-digit touchdowns? And as well, these are really good teams. The Titans finished 11-5 that season. The Seahawks 10-6. These are winning teams scoring a lot of points. I'm not sure the Bears are going to be a winning football team either. So this is a recipe for disaster if you want to take DJ Moore at his current ADP. Neither of these guys as well played with a quarterback as mobile as Justin Fields, who was 2nd in red zone rushing attempts last season. 5 inside the 5 touchdowns, was also 2nd at the quarterback position. So being able to score touchdowns seemed a little difficult here for Moore. And Moore, again, set his career high last year with 7 touchdowns. I think he's never had more than 4 in the 4 seasons prior. And I think this is also, despite a high target share I expect him to have, this will likely be the lowest amount of targets he's had since his rookie season. Because again, I go back to those teams that ran the ball more than 50% of plays. Those 10 teams, A.J. Brown had the most targets with 106 in 2020 on a 26% target share, which was the 9th best in the NFL that season. So I still think Moore could reach 106 targets. I think that's in the cards, but that puts him into a season that I think is more comparable to the one he just had. And the wide receiver 34 in fantasy points per game is not one reflective of a guy going as the wide receiver 23 right now. And again, we're not completely sure that we can get the type of passing efficiency, Ryan Tannehill gave A.J. Brown when you look at Justin Fields. He was 31st in adjusted completion percentage. He was 28th in adjusted completion percentage on passes of 20 plus yards. So can he give him explosive plays too, which A.J. Brown got plenty of in Tennessee? I have a lot of concern here. I don't trust the consistency of this team. I need him to score double-digit touchdowns. He's never done it in his career. Doesn't really have that profile. Last season was compared to his career, was maybe an outlier in the touchdown department. So DJ Moore is a player I'm avoiding this year too. Finally, our last player going in the 6th round, it is Rashad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's going as the running back 26 at the 603 currently. He was the running back 51 in 2022. That was in half PPR formats. I think a lot of people are drafting Rashad White with the expectation that, all the receiving volume these 2 guys received between him and Leonard Fournette will just go to him. I don't think this team is going to throw the ball to their running backs anywhere near the rate they did with Tom Brady. And now that you look at a team that's going to change its offensive coordinator and Dave Canales, who worked with the Seahawks, a team that didn't target running backs at a very high rate at all while he's been there. And then you have a new quarterback in Baker Mayfield, who still should be able to target running backs at an above average level. It was 19% in 2022 for him. So I still think there could be pretty solid receiving volume for White. He still could get into, the running close to the 50 reception mark. I think that's still possible, something he did last season with 56 receptions. But I don't expect this team to, this guy to have an Austin Eckler type year in the receiving game. And if he doesn't, the rushing opportunities and the rushing efficiency is going to be terrible. The rushing attack shouldn't improve. The offensive line arguably gotten worse. Lose Shaq Mason, replace him with Matt Filer, who's not been able to stay healthy, and the Chargers just completely released during the offseason. The running backs were hit at the line of scrimmage at the 2nd highest rate in the NFL. The run blocking has been brutal. They had the league worst 3.4 yards per carry, and 28th the line was in adjusted line yards. They're just not pushing the pile forward and creating opportunity for their backs. This is an offense that also didn't score a lot of points last season. They were 25th in scoring in points per game. So I wouldn't expect this team either, with a change at quarterback from the greatest quarterback of all time to Baker Mayfield, to see a lot of positive game scripts to run the ball in either. I think this is a team that, will be battling for potentially one of the worst records in the NFL. The defense is really good. The offense really isn't. And White's efficiency last season wasn't there whatsoever. White averaged a 3.1% breakaway run rate, which was 44th amongst running backs. He's not going to create many explosive plays. And despite having 50 receptions, this again goes to his efficiency. His yards per route run was 1.19, which was 21st amongst running backs, despite having 56 receptions on the season. There are only a handful of running backs that posted 50-plus receptions last year. And when he's running routes, he still didn't demand significant volume and opportunity. This is a product of an offense and a quarterback and a system that was checking the ball down a ton. So I have a lot of concerns about Rashad White. I don't think there's really any upside here. I think this offense will struggle to score points. He's not going to be able to be the receiver that people are drafting him to be right now, and he certainly won't be very efficient on the ground. So I can't be drafting him. Again, another running back in the dead zone that I'm certainly going to wide receiver, going to tight end, going anywhere but running back. And if you are here, I think you're going to lose your league drafting a guy like Rashad White. Okay, those are my 5 players that I think if you draft this season, you'll just be donating your league fee. You're better off, taking up sports betting or playing some DFS, doing anything but playing fantasy football if you're drafting these guys this season. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like. Would really, really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.